India's the third or the fourth largest producer, exporter of beef and leather in the world.
Now, we live in a world where profit is placed above people and planet. All systems of oppression are interconnected. We don't have power over the media because the media are in the back pockets often of politicians and corporations.
Working in the media space, how do you fight misinformation?
Here in India, misinformation spreads rapidly through WhatsApp. Many people will receive something from friends or family and they trust that, and then they send it on to more and more people in their community, and it spreads like wildfire.
WhatsApp University, we call it.
Veganism is the counterculture to carnism. A well-planned plant-based diet is suitable for humans of all ages. For me, veganism is ahimsa, because I do believe like ahimsa, veganism, non-violence is a practice. And every day you have to remind yourself that there is an opportunity for racial bias or gender bias, and it's all within all of us, and we constantly check ourselves. It's always there and we have to watch out for it.
Robbie, co-founder of Plant-Based News, founder of Freedom Food Alliance, creative director, campaigner, an AI enthusiast, an activist, and someone who's fighting misinformation in the food industry head-on. Welcome to Sustainability with Shreya. Thank you so much for doing this with me, and it's so good to finally have you here in India.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Robbie, I've been such an avid reader of Plant-Based News. It's where I go to get all the information that I need from the vegan industry. And you've been at it for so long. And as I said, you're definitely my go-to source. But working in the media space, how do you fight misinformation?
It's a really difficult question to answer because we're living in what we call a post-truth world, where there is so many sources of misinformation, and it's so easy for people to spread misinformation. But I think it's important to first set the scene and explain like the difference between what is called disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation is media or content that is purposely created to mislead people, to create false narratives for many different agendas. Such as, political agendas. So saying things about your opposition that are completely untrue, or talking about plant-based meats and saying that, they increase your chances of, heart attacks or cancers. These are completely untrue statements, but the media can take these statements or these studies and twist and distort them and then publish articles with headlines that are completely false. And so that's defined as disinformation because there is some kind of intent there. But then there's misinformation, and that's when people in the public might share something that's incorrect and they don't realize that it's incorrect. Here in India, misinformation spreads rapidly through WhatsApp because many people will receive something from friends or family and they trust that, and then they send it on to more and more people in their community, and it spreads like wildfire. So
WhatsApp University, we call it.
Right.
It's where people go to school.
Yeah, and it's a tricky thing because people are busy, our lives are very full, and we don't have time. Most people don't have time to stop and fact check and question. But I always say to people, before you share something, stop and think. Could this be false? Could there be a problem with this information? And that's why fact-checking websites and fact-checking platforms, and there's several in India. I don't know the names of them, but it's worth certainly Googling or looking for them. And I think it's a really great way to double-check if something is incorrect. You get political fact-checking, you get environmental fact-checking sites. So yeah, it's worth doing your research and trying to understand how agendas and different motivations play when it comes to the media that you consume.
What do you mean by post-truth world?
We live in a post-truth world. That means that it's becoming increasingly difficult to know what's real anymore because of AI, AI video and AI content creation using things like ChatGPT.
Deepfakes.
Yeah, deepfakes. It's becoming easy for people to misrepresent politicians and other advocates in the community. We could have activists having content made about them, which is completely false. You might see videos of, a politician saying something, but it's completely untrue. It's just deep fake. And so we're kind of drowning in information at the moment, and most people don't understand or know the difference between what is real and what isn't. And it's becoming harder to tell what's different, what's true and what isn't.
So how does an average user like you and me, how do we navigate this?
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's like being out in sea and you're stuck on a floating piece of wood and you can't figure out how to get back to land. You just hope that someone will come and rescue you. I think policy and regulation is essential. One of the biggest problems is social networks allow false information to spread so rapidly. And with AI technology, it is possible to stop misinformation in its tracks, so stop it spreading. So if the WhatsApp network detects something that could be damaging or dangerous misinformation, it could stop you sharing it. It could say this media is false or this is dangerous misinformation. But there's a real balance between like censorship and protecting the public, because we want to maintain a level of free speech,
right?
But at the same time, we also want to protect the public. So Meta, who's the biggest social networks in the world, they have to work out the difference between those two things. And it's not always clear and it's not always easy because, you know, something like racism or sexism, for example, isn't nice. But it doesn't mean that people shouldn't be allowed to say these things, because we should live in a world where people are allowed to speak their mind, but they should also pay the consequences of that.
Yeah.
So if you are racist or you're sexist or you're xenophobic, you might be spreading these damaging messages, but I think people should be held accountable. And I personally think people shouldn't be allowed to use social media anonymously. I think you should have to give a government ID to be able to use social media, so that if you are spreading racism or xenophobia, that you can be prosecuted for it. Now, many people hide behind anonymous profiles, and so they get to say whatever they want, and they're part of the problem, really.
Yeah. You mentioned AI, though. And as someone who's used ChatGPT even in its initial stages, AI had this undertone of being racist. AI had this undertone of, being sexist, and also having this colonized point of view where it was being biased about, certain geopolitical situations, wars included. How do you deal with that when you use AI tools to get the right information, but that's also biased?
The internet is biased, and that's where AI gets its knowledge from. And so, these large language models reflect society. So if society is racist, AI will become racist. And that's where we need to improve these technologies and monitor for bias and correct it accordingly. So, take the conflict in the Middle East, between the Palestinians and the Israelis. If you ask questions, it'll often favor an Israeli narrative.
It does.
And so it doesn't necessarily, and it doesn't take into account the complexities of geopolitical conflict. I think there is a sort of desire to try to stay neutral, but at the same time, what's going on in war zones is so complex, as in that there's so much violence, that a system like that, in its current state, it's impossible for it to think like a human being and then communicate to the person it's speaking to in a way where there's nuance, because there's many perspectives when it comes to war, and there's obviously problems on both sides. There's evil people on both sides, but there's also a hell of a lot of really good people on both sides who are suffering deeply. And when people ask very simple questions about a very complicated subject, it's not easy to get across the tragedy and the horrors of war in one paragraph.
Yeah, 100%. What about confirmation bias, though? Especially, because people say veganism is propaganda, and we're fueling that. So if you're Googling or, searching certain kind of information, are you just getting fed more of that? Is that feeding into what you already believe in?
You are. The internet reflects back to us the things that we're looking for, and social networks are really good at that. The way the algorithms work. So if you have a passion for cats or dogs, you're looking at cats and dog content, if you go to your Discover page or your Explore page, all you will see are cats and dogs. And then the week after, you might say, oh, I don't like cats and dogs anymore. I like giraffe or rhinos. And you start looking at that content. Then the algorithm will adjust accordingly and you'll see less cats and dogs. But that's nice content. That's wholesome content. But if you're looking at conspiratorial content or racist content or xenophobic content, that's the algorithm will share more of that towards you. It'll give you more of that and you'll see more of that. And it'll reinforce your belief systems. And social media platforms are very good at creating echo chambers, and it's a bit like one of those carnivorous plants, like a pitcher plant. It's got a beautiful flower and it attracts the fly, and that's like the social network. That's the content, and then the fly goes into the chamber and it falls down into the liquid at the bottom, and that's the echo chamber. A person sees more and more content that reinforces their worldview, and they get stuck at the bottom. And once people are stuck at the bottom in that echo chamber, it's very hard to get them out. And that can be lots of different things. It could be racism, xenophobia, sexism, homophobia, nationalism. People's identities are wound up in the information that they receive on a daily basis. And whenever they're opening Instagram or TikTok and they're seeing information that keeps reinforcing their beliefs about other groups of people or different religions, it just creates more division. But what's really interesting is that the division and the divisiveness of this content drives engagement. Engagement drives profit.
Yeah.
And this is
attention is profit.
Attention is profit. And this is what keeps giant platforms like Meta and TikTok in business, because the more human beings are fighting each other and attacking each other in the comments, that drives more conversation, more engagement, and keeps people hooked and addicted to social media.
Wow. Do you think we're on the other side of the spectrum, like on the other end of the spectrum, vegans, because we also have a certain worldview and we're so headstrong, we believe in it so passionately? Do you think people look at us that way and say that you're misinformed, you have the wrong data?
When it comes to animal rights, I think definitely, but because vegans are not a monolith, and by that I mean that, you have vegans which believe in the freedom of animals, but within veganism as a community, there is racism, sexism, xenophobia, transphobia, homophobia. You would expect vegans to be all peace-loving, kind, gentle people, but they're not. I've met many Americans through social media who are very racist and sexist and homophobic. Whenever we put up the pride flag every June or July, we get a lot of homophobic abuse from white, middle Americans who are also vegans. So
within the same community.
Yeah, because just because people believe one thing, it doesn't mean they agree or believe with something else. Just because people agree that animals need to be free of suffering, it's moral inconsistency is what it is. But it is something that is a quirk of our psychology. We heard of cognitive dissonance. Yeah. We can believe two opposing thoughts at the same time. Yeah. I love animals, but I like to kill and eat them. That's cognitive dissonance.
I love animals, but that's usually dogs and cats.
Yeah, and speciesism intertwined in that. All systems of oppression are interconnected, because what it does is it creates a thought system within that human mind which allows you to make excuses for your oppression. Oh, I love animals, but I love to eat bacon, so I like to eat, pigs don't matter. Or, I prefer this race of person, but I don't like these race of people because of these beliefs. These people deserve to be free, but these people don't have rights because of the color of their skin or their religious belief, Yeah. And we see this all over the world. It's unfortunately a common human trait. Yeah.
It's difference, right? It's the other. It's the fear of the other. If someone looks different or eats differently, or practices a different religion, or even a different has a different sexual preference, then there's that discrimination.
Yeah.
Balancing that though, being queer and being vegan at the same time. How do you balance these identities? Do you see that level of oppression as well? Do you see that level of discrimination?
Yeah.
Are they interconnected? Because for me, veganism is about empathy and kindness. It's about acceptance.
So for me, veganism is ahimsa, which is very relevant being here in India. I spoke about this last night when I was very fortunate to receive an award. Thanks to the Vegan First team. Thank you. Congratulations to you too.
Thank you.
And that this word ahimsa is such an important word because it is the practice of nonviolence. And in that sentence, practice is the key word. We grow up in a world that programs us and conditions us to think and feel in certain ways. It comes from our family, our parents, our grandparents, our culture, our karma, it ultimately generates the person that we are. And we have a shared karma, a collective karma of our country, and all these layers sit on top of us. But, it's up to us to break this karma and carve a new identity for ourselves. And this is what we're doing in all these different echo chambers. But the idea is that we need to break free from those echo chambers and see others in the ways we would like to be seen. And so as a queer person and a vegan person who are part of sort of minorities, I suppose, you get to see and experience all different types of prejudice and discrimination. So I experience prejudice and discrimination as a vegan because people say, you're crazy, you're an animal rights
people love to hate
zealot.
Vegans.
Yeah, but then I also get homophobic and homophobic abuse from people on social media because of my pronouns or because I have a rainbow flag on my profile. I'll get angry, hateful messages, and I've had them from vegans as well. People who say, trans people and transgendered people are immoral, or there's something deeply wrong with them. So I experienced that as well. But this is all within the identity of veganism because this is all a community I'm a part of. So I see all this oppressive behavior flowing between all different types of people. And you start to see all the interconnected nature of this oppressive thinking and behavior. And it's all really deeply rooted in ego. People's sense of self and their identity kind of overpowers their ability to feel compassion for all. And I think when you remove ego from the conversation, you see yourself as a human being. We are all one. The animals are our cousins, our family. We are all earthlings. For me, that's truly making the connection, because I do believe like ahimsa, veganism, non-violence is a practice. And every day you have to remind yourself that every person that you encounter, there is an opportunity for racial bias or gender bias. And it's all within all of us. And we have to constantly check ourselves and keep an eye on these, internal programmings or these influences from our culture or our family. It's always there, and we have to watch out for it.
Yeah. But does fighting for animal rights help in the fight within the LGBTQ community, or
Yes,
or vice versa?
Absolutely. I think you said earlier, none of us are free until we're all free. We will never see a peaceful world until human beings stop killing each other and stop oppressing each other. Our differences are truly just skin deep. We're all the same underneath the skin. But unfortunately, the systems of oppression that govern our world, many driven by a deeply patriarchal society across the planet, creates the divisions where it places certain people here and certain people underneath. And the people in power like it that way because it's convenient for them. But the scales are tipping across the world. Minorities and the tension between men and women is shifting in other countries around the world, and there's a lot of tension. And where there is change, there is conflict. Unfortunately, we're living through a time where there's so much change: technology, environment, human rights. I truly think humanity is at a crossroads. Maybe 3 different paths ahead of us.
You mentioned ahimsa, and that's part of Jainism as well. And I'm Jain. Grew up with hearing about nonviolence, and you practice Buddhism as well.
Yeah.
But both of these religions have their roots in India.
Yeah.
And we worship Mother Cow. We worship our cows. But of course, India is the 3rd or the 4th largest exporter of beef and leather in the world.
Yeah.
How does that balance out in terms of information and what we're fed as Indian citizens?
It's the cognitive dissonance. There's revering the cow, but then at the same time taking her milk, telling yourselves the story that this is an act of love, and we paint a picture in our minds and we imagine the cow being massaged and cared for. But, industrialized agriculture is here in India. And it is what allows the Indian population to consume so much dairy, because you cannot have a compassionate dairy industry with so many people needing and wanting to consume milk and dairy. So by virtue of the number of people that will demand that product, that is where factory farming was created, because it squashes and crams many, many animals into small spaces. So there's a real tension between the two worlds in the vegan community. One which sits in the world of animal welfare, and I'll explain that in a second. And then there's true animal liberation, where we believe that all animals should be free, that we exploit billions of land animals every single year for meat, for leather, for milk. But many people in the vegan community believe in an end to all of that. And then on the other side is something called animal welfare, which says that if animals are living in these exploitative systems and we have no way to get them out, surely we should try to make their lives a little better and try to reduce their suffering, even just a little. If someone you loved was in a prison and you could not get them out, would you campaign to improve the conditions in that prison where they lived in absolute squalor? Or would you just give up and walk away? Because if there was no way to get them out and they were stuck in that prison for the rest of their lives, would you abandon them and work on other issues? Or would you do everything in your power to make sure that the little time that they do have the suffering is reduced? And that's the tension between welfarism and abolitionism. And these are 2 worlds that exist in the kind of vegan mindset.
Yeah.
And
but does the welfare mean grass-fed and free range and
it can include that.
Organic?
Yeah. So there's lots of buzzwords that industry likes to use to make the public feel better about their food choices. And welfarism can often sometimes mean delaying the inevitable, because veganism and abolitionism wants to see an end to animal agriculture and exploitation of animals. And the people on this side feel like welfarism is like excusitarianism.
Excuse what?
Excusitarianism.
Okay, what is
making excuses for why we should keep eating animals, and but this, but that, but this, but that, all these different excuses. Unfortunately, animal agriculture is deeply entwined within our cultures across the planet and our economies. If we just ripped animal agriculture out of India tomorrow, this whole economy would probably collapse because it's entwined in every part of Indian life in some way or the other. And so when people say, oh, what about all the cows and the buffaloes if we stopped?
Exactly.
What would happen tomorrow? But it would never be like that. It would have to be a slow progression and a slow transition to a plant-based food system.
And we wouldn't have that many cows if we weren't forcefully impregnating them for...
There are so many cows
Dairy.
and animals, in pigs, chickens, because they're often forcibly impregnated by humans or machines or, so.
Yeah. What role does media have to play in a country like India that's been sold this lie that you need dairy, you need to consume animal products, protein, calcium, whatever that might be? How do we fight those campaigns, the amount of advertisement that's been thrown at you?
It's very hard in a country like India where, and I won't name any brands, there's big industry in this country and the same in the UK and the US that has so much power and political power. And so when campaigners and activists try to step up and reveal the truth to the public, they are often sent legal letters, they are shut down, they're watched, they're stalked by investigators. And so it's a real challenge, but this is where grassroots activism is key. We don't have power of the media because the media are in the back pockets often of politicians and corporations. There's many things we could do. We could get into the media as activists and campaigners. We could find our way to get jobs inside big media, get jobs inside these big companies and try and change them from the inside. But that requires coordination and mass mobilization. So one or two people is not going to do it. We need to get inside the machine and destroy it from the inside. That's the only way to do it. But also working from the outside as well, grassroots activism, doing campaigning, creating events like we've had this weekend, raising awareness and doing it in such a way that helps people understand that their actions and choices lead to suffering. This is a country which has deep spiritual roots, and many people here believe in karma, right? And so the law of cause and effect teaches that, if you do bad things, it will come back to you in this life or in others.
Yeah.
And so causing suffering, consciously causing suffering is bad karma, right? And so if you now know the truth about the agricultural industry that you are investing in every time you purchase milk or butter or ghee or whatever, you are directly or indirectly causing suffering. So you are creating a chain of negative karmic effects in your current life and in future lives as well. Yeah. So I think, activism, especially in this country, mustn't forget about spirituality and mustn't forget about religion because it's a core part of Indian culture. And I think sometimes activists and campaigners are thinking like a Western mind rather than, an Eastern mind, I think, because we need to make sure our activism is very culturally specific, because what works in India doesn't work in the UK, what works in America doesn't work in South America. So it's a huge job ahead of us. And I think we have to have many different tactics and tools to try and change industry, because industry is so powerful and it's been controlling our cultures across the world for so long. Coca-Cola, Nestle, these very, very big companies. They intertwine themselves with our lives, our families, our relationships.
Our emotions, it's storytelling.
Yeah. When you watch a McDonald's ad, we don't really talk about the burger.
Yeah.
We talk about family time or
how it makes you feel.
Grandma time. Yeah, friends and family. Christmas time if you're, in the UK or America. And so when you see and you hear the Christmas songs, you think about Coca-Cola and McDonald's.
Yeah.
Or the Father Christmas all in red, which Coca-Cola invented.
That's true. Can advertise be a positive influence, and how?
Absolutely. But the people behind it need to have ethical and sustainable agendas. We live in a world where, I won't use the C word, but we live in a world where,
capitalism.
We live in a world where profit is placed above people and planet.
Yeah.
Because the pursuit of profit is often at the expense of individuals, animals, and the environment, with this idea that there is infinite numbers of animals and minerals and resources to take, but the Earth is a finite resource. There are limited resources on our planet and limited life too. And so that's why I am a vegan, and I'm an ethical vegan, because I believe in preserving the beauty of this world, because it is limited. And the system that we live in, which is a pursuit of profit and personal wealth, is at the expense of our world. And for more than a century, we've been heading in a specific direction of consume. And the lack of regeneration or the lack of returning to the earth is something that has fallen out of our culture.
You've been running plant-based news for the last 9 years, right? What's the most shocking fact you've uncovered while covering stories and writing about the industry?
Most shocking facts, really hard question. It's probably becoming aware of how insidious the industry is and its tactics to maintain the status quo, understanding how there's a coordinated effort across the world, and often big industries talk to each other from within different countries.
Like the meat and the dairy
And how
industry together.
How they all work together to try to produce campaigns or disrupt social campaigns like the vegan movement to kind of interrupt and intercept the call for change. For example, there is something called Masters of Beef Advocacy Program in America.
Masters
of Beef Advocacy Program.
There's a program with that name.
It's a free online program where social activists and social campaigners and influencers and carnivore doctors and all kinds of different people can go and learn on how to advocate for beef, how to go on social media and advocate. It's a thing. 22,000 people have been through the program, and all of these people are out there on social media actively campaigning for people to eat more cows.
Your favorite fact about the plant-based industry?
Yeah, that there's more vegans today than there's ever been in the history of the world. There's more people fighting for this movement than ever before. And yes, there are some people, going back to eating animal products, but by and large, the activist community is growing. The movement is becoming more professional, and change is coming. It's unfortunately painfully slow.
Yeah, because what I hear is that veganism is dying. So many vegan businesses are going out of business. There's no future in this movement. No one's processed food has fake meat. It all comes back to fake meat. Apparently, the entire vegan movement has just been reduced to fake meat.
Yeah.
And if they see those companies not doing as well as they used to, they negate the entire movement in general. What do you have to say about the demise of?
I mean, I think that media likes to spin things in really hyperbolic ways, in ways that create hysteria. Just because people aren't buying plant-based meats, it doesn't mean that veganism as a philosophy, as a lifestyle, is diminishing. People are just eating differently. They are eating more vegetables. They're eating more tofu. Sales of tofu and tempeh in the UK are going through the roof. People's businesses in these areas are absolutely, they're really excelling. People are looking to eat more whole foods, more healthy foods, but price parity is a big problem. In the UK, a pack of pork bacon is £6 British pounds per kilogram, but a pack of vegan bacon is £29 per kilogram.
Wow.
So there's a huge difference. Yeah. And meat subsidies are what keep meat cheap. And I would like, as time goes on, I would like to be campaigning for an end to subsidies for animal agriculture, because we're essentially taking money from the public, tax money, giving it to farmers that are damaging and destroying the environment and producing products that are causing, serious human health problems. So subsidies are a kind of form of insanity, really, especially subsidies that are going to animal meat.
Yeah, it's the same in India. Dairy industry and the meat industry heavily subsidized, which is why cow milk is cheaper than most other forms of milk. What do you think about this perception that vegetarians have, that I'm morally superior because I'm vegetarian? Because at least if I'm consuming dairy, any milk product, I'm not killing the animal.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cognitive dissonance again, or a bit of a sort of lie we tell ourselves. Many vegetarians around the world actually say this. They feel like, they can wear leather because they think it's a byproduct, but the leather industry is the dairy industry. And cows that are used in the dairy industry often are killed around age 4 or 5. And cows can live until they're 25, 30 years, but they're milked and milked and milked until they're completely spent. And then they're shot in the head and turned into cheap meat for dogs or cats, or cheap meat products for humans. So, cows are some of the most deeply exploited animals on the planet, because they live very short lives. They're artificially inseminated over and over and over again, continuously. Here in India, they're shot with oxytocin, which tricks their bodies into thinking they're giving birth, so they keep producing milk. And people don't really understand what's happening because it's kept hidden. And as someone said, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we would all be vegetarian at least.
Yeah. What's the most common myths you find yourself busting, or what's the most common lie?
That vegans can't get enough protein. That's the number one thing. Most people don't know that all plants contain some amount of protein. What else? That we'll be weak and feeble, that we'll become anemic, that we can't become strong athletes, that we can't build muscle. That
you don't look too well, Robbie.
Keep wasting away, but this hasn't happened yet. That men who eat plant-based diets and who eat tofu and tempeh will have reduced testosterone levels. All of this is completely false. The documentary The Game Changers, and there's a second film coming out soon, really showed how athletes of all different genders and shapes and sizes can be have incredible performance on a plant-based diet. So it can be done. It doesn't mean that being plant-based is better than eating meat. I mean, obviously there are many incredible athletes who also eat animal products, but as a vegan, I'd like to say, if you can be strong and fit and healthy, why would you want to take the lives of a sentient being when you don't need to?
Yeah, I never asked you this, but obviously, I know you'd refer to facts and sources and you'd make this decision really rationally and logically. When, how, and why did you go vegan?
It really originally started about 12, 13 years ago. I had a lot of health problems like skin, like psoriasis and nasal sinus issues, and began a journey into trying to understand what was wrong with me. I'd seen lots of doctors and they couldn't explain what the issue was. And I tried a 5-day juice fast, which is fruits and vegetable juices every day for 5 days, no solid food. And I remember being in the supermarket, buying all these fruits, and I had 12 pineapples, and I were going through, and the lady at the checkout was saying, "Are you having a party?" And I was like, "No, this is my food for a week." And she laughed, and then I went home, and then we did this juice. It's not really a fast, but you're having fruits and vegetables. Yeah. And I felt incredible. I had so much energy. I was bouncing out of bed in the morning. I felt really alive. My digestion was great. I had no more bloating. My sinuses cleared up all in about 5 days. But then
in 5 days?
Yeah. But yeah, just a huge difference within a week. And then on the night of the final day, we went to a friend's birthday party at a pub, which is like a bar, if you know the word pub here. And I had a beef burger, which was very common for me throughout my life. And I absolutely hated it. I felt sick. I didn't want to eat the rest. I think I ate half of it and then I couldn't continue the rest. And that was the beginning of when I started to realize that I didn't want to eat meat, but I couldn't quite understand what was going on. It wasn't until I watched the documentary Earthlings, and then it kind of really came home. I'm a compassionate person. I'm also a Buddhist, and I care about, non-violence. So how can I be out there talking about compassion, non-violence, nuclear disarmament, peace, and then coming and sitting down every day and having a meal with, a poor tortured animal carcass on my plate. And that was a big realization for me after watching that film. And that was the kind of beginning of my vegan journey. And that was about 12 years ago now.
Wow. And that plant-based news started from that?
Yeah. So my friend and I, Klaus, met at a vegan event called Vegan Futures. We became friends and we started working on plant-based news as a hobby. And the story behind that is it was we're both quite obsessive. Once we find something we love, we just pour ourselves into it. And we were creating videos and content and social media content and doing lives and all kinds of different things. And then an amazing young man he's not young, he's my age, he's 45, sorry Khaled, Prince Khaled Al-Walid from Saudi Arabia, he emailed us and said, "I love what you're doing and I really want you to support you in some way." And we weren't sure who he was because I'm not familiar with Saudi royalty, but it turns out he was a member of the Saudi royal family, a passionate vegan, environmentalist, sustainability investor. Also
very unusual coming from.
Yeah. And his whole life and his family as well, very much invested in improving the lives of people, and planet. And he invested in the business. There was no business. He invested in us really. And we quit our jobs and we poured all our energy into plant-based news. 9 years later, it's the biggest vegan media platform in the world, thanks to his initial support and, of course, an amazing team.
Yeah. And all the time I've spent reading all the articles and giving you that engagement. I don't know if that counts, but
yeah, absolutely. Everything counts.
the journey from plant-based news to starting Freedom Food Alliance, what is that about? And how are you fighting misinformation in the food industry?
So after 9 years of being involved in media, I came to realize that our information system, social media, mainstream media, are completely poisoned by misinformation. And we spoke about the differences in the beginning of the chat, but there is no centralized organization that is fighting misinformation directly and challenging the food industry, the advertising industry, the mainstream media about this toxic narrative that they spread about food and nutrition. And obviously the food system is at the core of everything that goes on in this world. It's what sustains each one of us, all 8 billion of us. Yeah. And the Freedom Food Alliance, which is a non-profit organization, which is just getting started. I'm in the process of trying to find funding to make it a reality. I've got 7 amazing volunteers who are helping me, build the foundations of this nonprofit. And the mission really is to try to create a media platform, a powerful impact-led media platform like plant-based news, but very much focused on food, nutrition, and the food system and everything that interconnects with that. Because the mainstream media, whether it's in India or the UK or America, is in the pockets of industry. And they will be writing articles and doing media that pushes a specific narrative about why we should drink dairy, why we should eat cheese, why,
it's good for you.
It's good for you. And so we'll be fact checking and debunking media, especially media that's going viral, that's getting thousands of shares and lots of engagement, or influencers on social media, these carnivore doctors like Paul Saladino. I love the fact that he has the word salad in his name. He has millions of followers and his videos get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views. And he talks about how we should all be eating meat and, beef is essential and that we should be eating a steak a day. And, eggs are a vital part of a healthy diet and that vegetables are trying to kill us.
Vegetables are trying to kill us.
Yeah, but vegetables contain oxalates and anti-nutrients, which, there's always a slight grain of truth in all these kind of spurious claims. Beans, cruciferous vegetables all contain things called oxalates, but they're all in quite small quantities and they aren't a problem for healthy humans. Often when we cook them, it actually removes and reduces them. If we soak beans, for example, the phytates in the skin of the beans, actually, you can wash them away. We don't eat raw beans, but if we did, it would cause serious digestive problems. Those are the oxalates. Those are the skins that protect the bean. But when we wash beans and soak them and then wash them and then cook them, these substances are often not a problem for us and we can digest them. That's why cooking food gives us the energy that we have in our bodies. And so our platform really is to try to combat a lot of these people because there are advocates around the world who are trying to fight back, doctors, dietitians, food experts, but they're all individuals, all voices separated in this big chaotic noise of social media. And I want to bring them all together under one voice, the Freedom Food Alliance and our platform foodfacts.org, which is a bipartisan. So I want people from across the spectrum. Doesn't matter what your political perspective is. We all eat food. And we all have should have the freedom to choose food that is not going to cause harm to ourselves and the planet. Yeah. And so that's the mission of the Freedom Food Alliance, is to build a platform which stands up for the consumer and believes that, people deserve the right to be protected from false information. Because a lot of these carnivore doctors and these, glucose goddess types, they talk about certain types of food and they're demonizing oranges or bananas. And then 3 posts later, they're conveniently selling a bottle of pills for 70 euros or 80 euros. So there's always some kind of agenda there. Let's demonize certain foods, but then let's try and sell a pill or a potion or a cream. When people are trying to sell you something like that, I always say it's a red flag of some sort. So it's really important to, especially when people speak in absolutes, when they say, oh, no, we have to be doing this or we have to be doing that. Nutritional science is complex. Every human body is different. Yeah. But for the most part, most people, and both the American and the British Dietetic Association say a well-planned plant-based diet is suitable for humans of all ages. Yeah. And these are credible organizations. So we shouldn't be getting nutrition advice from physiotherapists or tarot card readers.
Yeah, or food influencers.
Or food influencers.
Because everyone says different things, right? Someone says keto is bad. Someone says intermittent fasting is bad. Somebody will, tell you need this and you need that. Who do you believe when you don't know who to believe?
You believe an expert, a person who is a dietitian. This is a person who spent many years studying nutrition. You believe a doctor who has a specialty in human nutrition. And all the science says, the Eat Lancet report, the China study, there's many very large, very well-researched studies that show a mostly plant-based diet is better for human health. There's the blue zones that are these places around the world where there's the most number of people who live to 100. And all of these people who live in these regions all eat a mostly plant-based diet, like 95% plant-based. They might eat a little bit of meat, tiny bits of cheese, and maybe a bit of honey there and here and there. But meat is always for flavor. It's only eaten on special occasions. But the rest of the year, they're eating whole foods, drinking lots of water, having amazing community, walking everywhere, spending time exercising, and they all live to 100 and they're full of life and
it's
vibrance.
On Netflix, right? It's called Live to 100?
Yes, with Dan Buettner. And that's because they're fueling their bodies with whole foods that are grown they come from the ground.
That they grow that most often
that they're growing themselves.
The ones growing it,
yeah, which isn't possible for all of us. But I think when we are prioritizing a diet rich in whole foods, but also I'm not an expert in nutrition, so don't listen to me. Go and speak to the experts. The Freedom Food Alliance website has a page that says Alliance Advisors, and on there are loads of incredible dietitians and doctors and real experts who have spent their lives, dedicated their lives to the pursuit of good nutritional science. And they're not all vegan. A lot of them, like Dr. Idris Mughal, I think I butchered his surname, sorry. His specialty is nutritional science, and he is incredible at fact checking and debunking. A lot of these influencers on Instagram, please do follow him, Dr. Ids, IDZ. He's phenomenal.
Where does a misinformation expert get their information from?
From experts, as I said, that's always the important thing to look at. Organizations like dietetic associations, these are organizations that spend a lot of time and money and research on looking and pursuing the correct information in science through doing real life studies on people, because often people have anecdotal evidence, because there's different qualities of evidence. At the bottom is anecdotes, which is individuals that say, my grandma lived to 100, she smoked every day, she ate eggs every day, she ate ghee every day, she lived to 100, she's fine, so everyone should eat like that. That might be true for your grandmother, and that's an anecdote, but it's not the purest form of evidence, which is large meta-analyses, which is lots of different studies done together, where you bring together the evidence of lots of different people over large masses of land, like across Europe or across the Indian subcontinent, and you pull together all that evidence over a long extended period of time. That's the best quality evidence. And so these big organizations and these individuals like dietitians and dietary experts, they work with this type of data and this type of information, free from dogma and free from agenda. Yeah. Their mission is in pursuit of the truth. But obviously, Paul Saladino, his truth is we should all be eating meat. And millions of people believe him because the way he speaks and his communication style is so passionate and big, larger than life, that he's very good at convincing you to go and eat beef. And millions of Americans probably believe him because he sounds so convincing. Yeah. And he's got MD on his name, doctor. So,
That's what I mean. These nutritionists and these experts and these dietitians who also promote that, who also to a large extent. I met a friend the other day and he said that I showed my nutritionist the packet, the food label behind a processed meat company, a plant-based meat company. And, the nutritionist said that you're better off eating animal meat than that because it's so processed that it's worse for you.
It's completely untrue. Just because something is processed, it doesn't mean it's bad for you. That's what's called an appeal to nature fallacy. Because something is natural does not mean it's good for you. Snake poison is natural. It's not good for you. Right? Rivers are naturally occurring geological things in our environment. But if you fall in it, you'll probably drown, if it's like a very violent river. There's lots of natural things in our world that are toxic. Toxic flowers, toxic berries. But human culture, there's nothing natural about our culture. Our clothes, our airplanes, our technology, none of this is natural. We live in a very unnatural world because we have created it. Modern medicine, not natural, but it saves millions of lives, right? Thank goodness for the unnatural because it's given us the world to, turn on the tap, water comes out. That's not natural. We created that. The electricity in all our homes, we turn on the switch, the lights come on. That's not natural. So this idea that you shouldn't eat a Beyond Burger because it's not natural and the ingredients don't seem natural, and that you should eat a beef burger or a chicken burger because that's natural. They're not telling you about the antibiotics, the hormones, the bovine viruses, the bacteria, the feces in the meat.
You'd find that under a microscope.
You wouldn't see that on the ingredients because by law, you just have to say chicken, ingredients chicken, or ingredients beef, or ingredients pork. Whereas the Beyond Burger, by law, because it's been processed, you have to include all the ingredients. And it's about understanding your ingredients. Just because something that sounds scientific like methyl cellulose sounds scary, it does not mean it's bad for you. Methyl cellulose is just cellulose. It's a binding agent that keeps the meat together and gives it a nice texture. And some people say it's like a laxative. It's like a chemical laxative. But if you eat too much fiber, what happens? Everything moves, right? But that would only happen if you ate like 20 Beyond Burgers. But Beyond Burgers are lower in saturated fat. They're high in fiber. They have no antibiotics. They have no hormones. So when you compare a Beyond Burger to a beef burger, a Beyond Burger is healthier. It's not the healthiest. What would be healthier is probably a bean burger or a lentil burger made with sweet potato and, whole foods. That's probably the most healthy, because health is a spectrum. When someone says, is this Beyond Burger healthy? I'll say, compared to what? Compared to a beef burger made from a factory farm, absolutely not. Compared to a bean burger, it's less healthy. So, people like to speak in absolutes, but it's about understanding the spectrum. When you look at the ingredients listing of a Beyond Burger, rather than going, I don't understand any of this, look up the ingredients yourself. What is methyl cellulose? What is sodium metabisulfate? Sounds scary, but all it is like, it's a preserving agent, which is extracted from a certain type of plant, or like absorbic acid. Sounds scary, but it's just vitamin C. It's extracted from oranges. Ingredients often contain the chemical name because legally you have to do that. But I also like when people say, I can't eat these foods because they have got too many chemicals. Well, your body is made of chemicals. The plants are made of chemicals. Water is a chemical, dihydrogen oxide. But if I say to you, there's dihydrogen oxide in all your food and it's really dangerous, you would go, wow, really? And I say, yeah, it's really dangerous. If you have too much of it, it'll kill you. And you'll go, wow, I didn't know that. What's dihydrogen oxide? And I'm like, it's water. And it's true. If you drank 10 liters, 12 liters of water now in the next half an hour, you could die, because it dilutes your electrolytes and you could go into cardiac arrest.
Wow.
So water, which is the bringer of life in our world, that can even kill us. So it's the dose that makes the poison. And all these substances, these various additives and ingredients we have in our food. Salt, sodium chloride. We add it to our food. We add a little of our food. It's good for us. To a certain amount. But if we have too much salt, it can harden our arteries and it can cause serious health problems. So but there are things like cyanide. Cyanide occurs in apple seeds. Amalgam. So when you eat an apple seed, if you grind it up and it goes in your stomach, it turns into cyanide, which is a poison. If you eat 100 apple seeds, it could kill you.
Well, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's the substance in apple seed becomes cyanide when it's digested. So if you ground up 100, I'm not giving anyone ideas to kill people here. But if you ground up like
101 ways to die as a vegan, apple seeds.
If you crushed up and ground up the seeds of maybe 200, 300 apples and extracted I forget the name, how to pronounce it, of the chemical, but that can become cyanide and it can kill you. You can kill someone with that. Ooh. So, dangerous and toxic substances are in all the different foods, only when they are of really high concentrations, even something as simple as water.
Yeah. I hear this very often though, especially in India, people tell me that vegans kill a lot more animals, pesticides and crop deaths and whatnot. In growing the crops that we consume, we end up killing more animals. What do you have to say about that?
Well, when you eat a plant-based diet, it requires 18 times less land for you to eat the food that you eat. So when you think about it, most agricultural land, like in the US and the UK, it's like 80% of agricultural land goes to farming animals, well, all the food to feed animals. So if you really care about crop deaths, mice, insects, birds, then you'll stop eating animals because, by virtue of the sheer number of the land mass that's used to farm crops to feed animals, it absolutely dwarfs that of a vegan and plant-based diet. So, all these massive soy fields, monocropping, that especially it's happening in South America where they're cutting down huge amounts of rainforest to plant soybeans. Within all of that, there are ants and mice and birds and crickets that are dying from, pesticides because we're feeding those foods to animals. So yeah, if you really want to be a plant activist and, worry about like the poor plants suffering and the animals suffering, and the insects and the birds, and stop eating animal products because you massively reduce the land required to feed you the diet that you consume every day.
Even though plants have no central nervous system, it's always about killing plants and plants, feeling.
Exactly. That's also a subject that comes up a lot. Oh, but plants have feelings and plants are sentient. Plants do not have feelings and plants are not sentient. Some plants have some form of very simple and simplistic communication methods through their roots and things, but that does not mean they're singing to each other or crying or screaming. There's a guru from India, which I will not mention his name. He talks about how trees scream when you cut them down, and plants scream out for help when we rip them from the ground because scientists have seen this or that. Let's just be clear about the biology of plants. Plants have no brain and no central nervous system. These organs allow us to experience the world and experience pain through the sensory nerve endings and the biology of our mammalian bodies. Birds have them, fish have them, amphibians have them, but plants do not. And so when we cut a carrot in half, it does not scream and say stop and help. Whereas if you took a piglet or a dog or a cat, it would scream with pain. Yeah. It would feel pain, objectively feel the pain. Yeah. So this idea that plants are sentient and self-aware is biologically impossible. There may be some level of sentience and not sentience, some level of intelligence in quotes, but that's more moving into the realms of spirituality and maybe the non-physical perhaps. But yeah, we need to see and listen, use our ears and use our eyes. If we see animals suffering, you can feel it. You feel their pain. You hear their screams. That does not happen with a tree or a carrot or a potato.
Yeah. What about people who say it's better for me to consume meat that's locally grown than fly in avocados from Latin America or grow almond milk in California?
Yeah, that's a really important one because there's this perception that the transport is where most of the emissions come from. But if you buy your chicken locally or your pork locally or your beef locally, most of the emissions come from the animal itself and the feed, and also the emissions from the animals, burps and farts and feces. If you eat cows in the UK and they're bought locally, obviously there's no transport. There's not much emissions from the transport, but the amount of emissions from the cow itself is the methane, it's the nitrous oxide, it's the carbon dioxide. If you had almonds or avocados from South America, it would still be more environmentally friendly to eat the avocados and the plant-based proteins from South America or North America or anywhere in the world, because most of them have come by sea. And even producing those vegetables, it produces much smaller, it has much smaller emissions than the beef or the chicken or the pork. Beef is the biggest producer of greenhouse gas emissions, and this is what's causing harm to our environment.
Yeah. People who say that the animal was already killed before it got to my plate. I didn't kill the animal, it was already dead, so why wouldn't I eat it?
This is because there's a lack of understanding of this fundamental principle of supply and demand. When you walk into your local supermarket and you pick up a pack of chicken or pork or mutton, you are feeding into a system of supply and demand, because when you pick up that pack, there is another pack that is replaced in that spot. And you keep doing that, and thousands and tens of thousands or millions of people are doing that every single day, and they're feeding that system of demand. 1,000 packs of chicken are sold in the supermarket this week. Another 1,000 appear, which requires 3,000 chickens to be killed the week before. So it's just a supply and demand, and until you break that behavior, you continue to feed the problem and feed the system, which, continues to kill and, damage the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If non-vegans don't tell you what to do, why do vegans tell everyone what to do? Shouldn't we just respect each other's views and opinions?
Because people like to live in a state of ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. I don't want to know. Don't tell me the truth. I don't want to see the reality of what goes on these farms. I'm a good person. I buy my meat locally. My butcher told me that the animals are killed nicely.
They were happy. They lived a happy life.
They're happy to die. The chicken just walks up to you and says, "Take my life. I'm going to give you my body for this chicken burger," which we all know is completely untrue. They're lies that people tell themselves. In the UK, we have something called farm assurance programs. And there's these labels, these stickers that you see on packs of meat. And there's the red tractor. There's the RSPCA assured. And the one that's the most interesting is the RSPCA assured. And you'll see this on packs of beef, chicken, fish. And that says that these animals have been treated well, that the environment where these animals have been raised is clean and everything like that. It's a complete lie. But what's really fascinating is the RSPCA, which is the oldest animal welfare group in the world, is the Royal Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Animals.
Protection of cruelty.
Yeah. Protection, like against the cruelty of animals. And this organization, it's 100+ years old. They have a farm assurance program that goes on to meat products across the UK, which helps the consumer feel better about their meat consumption. And it's a complete facade. The Animal Rising group, animal advocacy group in the UK did a huge investigation, 40+ investigations over the last few months in the UK, and uncovered the most horrific conditions across the country and farms up and down the country that are RSPCA assured farms, pigs and chickens living in the most horrific environments, walking in their own feces, the smell, the stench, no water, nothing to do, pigs in these terrible dark sheds, walking around like zombies, eating each other. These are the environments that these animals are being reared in. But this RSPCA assured sticker goes on the pack when it arrives at the supermarket, and it creates an illusion that people buy into. And this is ultimately the whole animal agriculture system. It creates an illusion using advertising, and it tells people these stories that people believe, and it's what keeps people hooked on meat, because they say, "Oh, I love animals, but I buy RSPCA assured, so that's fine." The animals must have a nice life and a nice death.
Yeah.
That ultimately makes people feel good about their bad choices. But this is the illusion that we're fighting against, and this is what we're breaking with veganism. Veganism is the counterculture to carnism. Carnism is the dominant ideology that exists on Earth today. And that ideology teaches us as human beings. Carnism was coined by Dr. Melanie Joy, an American psychologist. And carnism teaches us that eating animals is normal, natural, and necessary, and sometimes nice because it tastes good. But we never challenge it. And to answer your question is, more directly, people who are born into a carnistic culture don't feel the need to say anything because they don't realize they exist in that belief system.
Yeah.
Because no one told them that they have a choice.
So just dogma.
It's dogma. It's like religion in a way. It's an invisible religion because it has dogma. It has all kinds of
just
conditioning and belief systems built up over hundreds of years, maybe more than thousands of years. People are eaten very differently, and then because of our using the C word again, sorry, capitalist culture, it's all the pursuit of profit. So what was something that we consumed maybe once a week, because of capitalism and the pursuit of profit and the rapid expansion of industrialized animal agriculture, 99% of the world eats animals almost every day. And that's why we're in the trouble we're in.
What about people who say that, why are we not fighting for human rights? There's people who are suffering. Why are you fighting for animal rights? Shouldn't we prioritizing people and human needs over animal needs?
I think it's possible to care about both issues simultaneously. I'm often speaking out about human rights on my personal social medias. I think, going to your point earlier, you said none of us are free until we're all free. That's such an important point. All systems of oppression are interlinked. The animal agriculture industry makes a lot of money, and a lot of that money ends up in governments, and a lot of that money ends up in war, and it's funding conflict. And so, when you stop eating animals, you are pulling your financial support for industries which are causing harm to human beings, because animals are not the only victims of the animal agriculture industry. Across the planet, migrant workers and people from lower classes or castes are forced into slaughterhouses and environments that are terribly toxic and dangerous, and they are trapped in those systems because it's all they can afford to do and live in. Here in India, there'll be millions of Indians who are being forced into working in these environments, killing animals in slaughterhouses to feed the population. And the population doesn't know that there are all these people suffering in these horrible environments. Many people who work in these environments end up with PTSD and are much more prone to domestic violence because they're experiencing violence on a daily basis. And so, the system, everything's feeding everything else. And so when you go vegan, you are part of a system of meaningful change, which improves the environment, which improves your health, which reduces suffering. Personally, as a Buddhist, I'd like to say it improves your karma. No way to prove that, but that's what I believe. And I think ultimately, when we wake up from the lie or the matrix, in a way, Dr. Melanie Joy talks about it like the meat matrix. We're in this kind of invisible belief system that we're born into, and then we break out of it and we realize there's all this injustice going on. We see all the human rights injustices and we see all the animal rights injustices. And, we only have one life, and there's only so much time that each person can devote to one cause or the other.
Yeah.
But I think it is possible to go on a march or a protest for human rights, and to go on a march and protest for animal rights. Many people do, and there are many people who care about both issues equally. So
the fight for animal rights is fight for human rights.
Absolutely.
Robbie, my last question to you is, what does sustainability mean to you?
Sustainability means conscious consumption. It means placing your money and your earnings in systems that improve society for humans and animals in the planet, and doing your best to choose products and services that are giving back to the planet. And that's not always possible. I believe there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, because the entire world is built in a way that means that we are constantly extracting from the planet. But there are loads of wonderful products and companies and services that are trying to make a change. Unfortunately, many of them are unaffordable for most of the public, but I hope that will change. Ultimately, it's about consuming less, really. If you don't have loads of money, it's about making sure that when you are spending money, you're investing in clothing or products that are going to last longer. Shopping in places where, garments are maybe worn once and then thrown away. A lot of people live like that. And it's about breaking out of this sort of materialist culture where we are being just taught for economies to keep moving, we have to just keep consuming, buy more. And it's trying to break out of that mindset, which is happening in much of the world today, but it's unfortunately painfully slow, and we are living on borrowed time.
Yeah, from the future generation.
Yeah.
As well. Okay, my last question to you is, do you have any advice for someone who's trying to fight misinformation or disinformation, someone who's been fed all these lies by the meat and the dairy industry? How does one begin to unlearn?
Educating yourself and following the experts, people who really know this stuff about nutrition or environmental protection, or sustainability experts who are professors or people who've studied it for many, many years. There's people like Greta Thunberg. She's not a climate expert, but over the last few years, she spent a lot of time immersing herself in that topic. And, she gets a lot of abuse for her opinions and her views, but ultimately there are a lot of good people out there who are fighting for the freedom of our planet and the people on it. And sometimes it can be very hard to know who to trust, and that isn't easy. But I think looking for biases and looking for red flags, like, people trying to sell you pills and potions. I think ultimately for people to be healthy, we just need to be eating more whole foods, fruits and vegetables, and, investing in food systems that repair and regenerate the planet. But it's a work in progress. I don't think there's a simple answer, especially, as I said, in this post-truth world where it's hard to know what's real and what isn't anymore. Educating yourself and learning and studying and absorbing as much information as possible, and taking the time to, learn how to fact check, and learning what does it mean for a source to be credible. this is what we have to do.
Yeah. My last question is, how do we support the work that you do and what you're trying to build with Freedom Food Alliance?
Yeah, so my Instagram is foodfacts.org, DOTORG. Following us on Instagram, sharing our fact checks, donating to us if you can, or if there's, philanthropic support, is, supporting the platform, because obviously for us to succeed and for this to work well, we need to be able to have a staff and a team who can create great content, who can challenge the mainstream media, lawyers. We might need some good lawyers because, if we are going up against large dairy companies in certain parts of the world, we might have problems. Oh, yeah. And so, having good lawyers that can protect our organization and protect the integrity and the kind of mission that we're on, because, it's a David and Goliath situation. Yeah. Like, we are tiny, but we are mighty.
Yeah. Okay. My last question. No, I'm joking. Robbie, thank you so much for doing this with me.
My pleasure.
I wish you so much power. Honestly, so much power to you for what you're trying to do. You're up against such a powerful industry. And as you said, they're funding all these lies, and they are massive, and they have a huge amount of wealth to fund these lies as well. Yeah. So you're up against giants, and I wish you all the luck and resolute.
Thank you.
When in this fight. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for your work. And I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Don't do the clap, okay? Do not do it. Do not. No, do not do it. When you cheers, you gotta drink, otherwise you'll bad sex for 7 years. No one wants that. I'll hit you with whatever. No, I do not say that on camera. I do not hit my team. I do not harass my team. I'm vegan. Robbie Lockie. Did I say that right?
You did.
Because Lockie in Hindi means bitter god.
Means what? Bitter god.
Yeah.
Lockie.
Yeah. Now I'm not going to be able to say it.
Well, that's so funny. In Nordic culture, Lockie is mischief.
Is mischief?
Yeah, the god of mischief.
Robbie Lockie. Fuck. Robbie Lockie. Fuck. Robbie Lockie. Fuck. I was going to say founder. I'm not like this, I promise. I'm not like this. This is not a testimony of how this is gonna go.